at least okay. Today is a Thursday, which means it's a history day. Hi. I'm so frustrated. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing. Which is I think that's just how life is sometimes. So it's okay. I'm just gonna sit here and be mildly frustrated. And that is just, it is the vibe. It is the vibe. It is the slay. It is the whatever the fuck. It has nothing to do with you guys. I'm gonna be like ready to go and like so soon. So soon. Man, I'm just like, girl, what the fuck? Anyways, Mark says mildly frustrated, huh? Nah, I was low-key kind of crashing out. But it's okay. Such is life. It's what I get for being so good at my job. It's okay. I am okay. Poor Andrew was just sitting there, and I was like, I need to vent to you so I don't vent on stream the entire time. And he was like, really? And I was like, just sit there and listen to me. So I was ready to go like 15 minutes ago. But I'm good. And I'm mad again. Not even mad. How are you, Marky Mark? I'm going to distract myself with all of these beautiful chalk things. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and we're going to see what picks up best on the camera. What the hell happened? Bitches. That's what happened, Marky Mark. No, I'm kidding. So you know how, like, I'm good. I fucked up and woke up like an hour ago, so this week will be fun. Oh. Did you sleep in super late? It's like, oh, you've been off. Wait, do you start work next week or this week? Isn't it Thursday? It's just past midnight. I started work this week. Oh. So did you like take a nap? Nice. Nice. Vibes. Hi, George. Hello. I'm gonna test out all the colors while we're talking. Let me see if like the mic can pick me up. Also, because I'm agitated, I wore cozy clothes. Fight me. Anyways, it's like a whole lot of booty. But these are like old sweatpants. Like, remember when people wanted like the sweatpants that are like tighter or whatever? I'm also doing laundry. It's just been one of those days. Mark says, yeah, I woke up for a meeting, realized someone was working, went back to sleep, woke up at 15, then I got tired again and slept at 23. LOL. R.I.P. This is like the propaganda about working from home. Okay. Yellow, visible. I'm just gonna go color by color and see how visible each one is. I'm not necessarily gonna write a lot on here because I think, ooh, I think the pink is brighter. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna go beat for beat, baby. Blue. Ba-boo-dee ba-doo-ba. I don't have a good enough camera. I think that's probably the best one. So far, yeah. Yeah, I should probably work through the night. Oh no. That's okay. You and I can roid rage together. Except I'm not on roids. But I got my paycheck, so I have to do adulting for a while so I don't forget. That's very relatable. Ah, shit. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna go fast. Y'all, I'm fast. I wanted to see if like any of the colors would pick up. It looks like not a lot of them are going to, but that's okay. On my TikTok, can you guys even hear me? On my TikTok, it'll pick up. So gray, pink, green. Ah, shit. Ah, shit. But to be sure that they stay in order. Okay. Ugh. Oh no. Did you guys see the South Park episode? Hi, Siri. You're okay, Oliver. Oh, settle. Come here. Oh, sorry, my mic. Oliver, come here. Come in here. Do not be a pelt. You leave. Come here. Come here. Come on. Sit. Park it. Park it. Thank you. Oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. I'm trying to see what colors do the best. I think green, yellows, and pinks. Let's see. Yeah, white probably did the best. Wait, fuck. Which way? There. Hi. How am I? I'm agitated as fuck. Roid rage, baby. I'm sorry, I don't do roids. I don't do that. But I'm just a little peeved off. That's okay. Anyways, how are you, Bubblegum? Anything exciting? Oh no, I had a good day. I'm just annoyed. I'm annoyed because, like, you know, I'm not gonna dive super deep into it, but I'll give a brief explainer. I live in a conservative state. I have a job giving history lectures, right? History lectures and discussions. I get paid part-time to do that. My manager has asked me, because so many customers complain about it all the time, aka conservatives, right? They complain about the topics being too political. Do you want to know what the discussions are about? I'm going to tell you. It's literally about union work. How am I supposed to have a discussion about journalism and union work and omit politics when union work and journalism are both inherently political? Like, how am I supposed to have these nuanced discussions and not talk about politics? And I don't even know how to, like, send the email back because I have to, like, work this weekend. So I'm like, how do you want me to do my job? Talking about union work and journalism and print media without discussing politics. Because that is what it's supposed to be about. And my mind is baffled. Like, literally baffled. Because what do you say to that when that is the whole premise of the discussion? Like, and I read that email earlier today, and I've just been sitting here, like, ever since, like, so you want me to have political discussions, but not make it political. AKA, you want me to not make conservatives mad. But how am I supposed to not make conservatives mad when you want me to talk about the history of these topics and union work? And she sent you an email instead of just coming to talk to you in person? Yeah, because someone complained. And then they put a ton of, like, stuff in that I never discuss. And I'm just like, I never said that to like anyone. I would never discuss these certain things in my things because I understand where the line is. Like, I understand that I'm not going to bring like religious stuff into play. I'm not going to dive super deep into certain topics unless asked about it. So, like, if I talk about journalism and I talk about the union work and I talk about the things that were happening in our state at the time, but I only dive deeper if they ask me, and then I actively say, this is not something I can dive deep into. Here's a place that you can get good resources. So I refer them to other museums, history lectures, and like educational resources. I don't even dive deep into it. Like, I legitimately don't dive deep into any of it at all. Like, there are like children there sometimes, so obviously I can't dive into like certain aspects of certain discussions. Like, what do you want me to do? Yeah, it sounds difficult. I don't know. I don't know. They want it to be an educational institution and they want me to keep collaborating with research institutions in the area. But then how am I supposed to do that if the stuff I'm discussing isn't allowed to have academic integrity? Like, the job is reliant upon academic integrity, which means that I have to be honest about these topics. Or if it's something that would be inappropriate for me to extrapolate on, I can tell them that they can find more resources in other areas. Yeah, and George says, as a formal manager, I would never send an email. I talk to my folks in person. Oh, she knows that she would not be able to like talk to me about this in person. This is why people quit. This is why they don't have anyone there because they're trying to please people about education and history, which is ridiculous because you can't modify history just to make people happy. It is, if you want to get students here and if you want to allow for it to be part of the institution, you have to have academic integrity. And if you're not going to allow for their, like, I teach. Do I teach like full time and get paid for like all that stuff? No. I teach on my own as like a volunteer basis. This is like another like lecture gig or whatever that I do that is like semi adjacent to it, right? But I have lots of stuff that I do in academia and I grew up going to like I grew up with this shit. So when I'm like sitting here and I'm like, how am I supposed to do a job where you want to have it be more adjacent to academia, but then you're telling me that I can't accurately talk about things? Like, how, what am I supposed to be like? Oh, union work never had like any problems. There was nothing. Like, what do you want me to say? That union work isn't political? And this is like, I am talking about this a little bit because it is kind of adjacent to the discussions that we're having because we're discussing anarchy, which is like, I think it's fine. But yeah, like, she knows that she couldn't say this stuff to my face because it's bullshit. Like, it's literally bullshit. Like, you want it to be an academic institution, but you don't want anything to be factual or academic based. You can't, like, have both. Like, there's a reason why history teachers and people in academia come there to listen to me talk about stuff. There's a reason why I give information about the topics to other academic resources in the state. There's a reason why we're getting a better reputation, and it's because of the work that I've been putting in. There's a reason why we're able to network with more prestigious institutions now, and that is because I've been putting in the fucking work. So, like, when you are sitting there and you're telling me you don't want it to be academic, when that's the people that you told me to market it towards, like, I don't understand. I don't understand. I give, like, 2-hour-long lectures on these topics. I literally...
Ain't no way that you were like, I gotta yap to you so I don't yap about it on stream.
Well, you know what? I'm a fucking yap about it now too, sir. You got a problem, Mr. Andrew?
Wild.
I'm not saying the things that... I'm agitated. I'm leaving out specific details on stream because I'm not doxing anybody and I don't want to make anybody look bad, which is why I'm being very fake. Anyway, George says, if she wants to sugarcoat your topics, that's not teaching history. I know, but I also understand that there's like a way that you should do it. Like, I understand that when there are children there, I'm not going to dive deep into like some aspects of the history that are more sensitive. Like how people report on like experimentation and stuff like that, like horrible things that happen to people. Like, I'm not going to dive into that, but there are so many topics that I have to dive into that are part of the program and the rulebook that they give me that are inherently like political. The entire thing is political because it is centered around union work and journalism, both of which are extremely political parts of history. It has always been political. So then she's telling me to stop making it as political, and I'm like, what do you want from me? That is what it is. Like, I helped set the standard to the bar where we are now considered to be more of a resource. And you are telling me that I should just backtrack all of that? Like, do you want to be an academic resource? Do you want to be reputable, or do you not want that? Because if you don't want to be reputable, that's your decision. Like, I respect that for you. And I can tone it back and I'll find another job somewhere else because it's not hard for me to fucking do that. I'm just like, I came here and I took on the position because you wanted to up the standards. And I was willing to do that because I have extensive background in both of these topics. So, like, not just like academic background, I have IRL fucking experience with this shit. So like, I can give you that hands-on approach and I can tell you how you can fill in the blanks with people, and you are not willing to do that. You are not willing to accept that. And like, just because one conservative person who's fucking anti-union is pissed about it, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you came to a discussion about one of the biggest union leaders that we've ever had. Like, I'm sorry that you don't want to listen to that. Like, and I had opportunities to talk to her in person about this stuff, and she wouldn't do it. She sent it to me in an email, which means that I know that she wants it to be formal, and that's why I'm waiting to, like, reply to any of this, because I'm like, girl, what you're saying makes no sense because you wanted me to do this. You want me to, it's literally in my job title, to network with people and to bring it to that standard, because I have to bring it to that standard before we can get more people in academia involved. And with me doing that, people are going to be inherently frustrated with you, and they're going to be frustrated with it because the fact is, we're going, like, the average demographic of people in Nebraska is becoming more and more and more conservative. So, like, I'm not going to be able to make those people happy because the reality of history, hey, chill out. The reality is not what people in power right now are trying to present it to be. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to people, but I also understand that I don't have time to go into everything, so I always give other resources. It's not like I talk about things and I'm just like, this is what I want it to be, this is what I want it to be. I'm like, no. I have resources for literally everything I discuss, and I follow the rule book and the guidelines that they have given me. So it's like, change your fucking guidelines if you don't want me to do it, and then what am I supposed to do with my job anymore? Like, I'm not citing propaganda because that's not my job. If I want to talk about anything, I come to stream and I discuss the things that I want to talk about here. And I even vaguely go over certain aspects of it because I don't want to dive super fucking deep into it. Like, come on. Anyways, I'm agitated. I'm like super agitated because I'm like, you're telling me that you want me to not make a political topic political, when I am approaching it from the most apolitical perspective whatsoever. Like, and giving value to like, girl, come on. It's like, you know, they want to use it for other stuff, and they want it to make it like happy-go-lucky, but that's not what it is. And that's the frustrating thing. So I'm like, what do you want from me? Anyways, I need to chill the fuck out. It's like, I can can like modify stuff or whatever, but you have to actually tell me the things that I need to modify instead of just being like, make it less political. Has she followed you when you've given the tour? Yeah. Yeah, and my lectures. They know everything I talk about. I teach people how to have these discussions and topics. Like, I have had discussions with historians. Like, all of the other historians that give tours give the same tours that I do. I don't know why she's trying to pick me out. And I think it's because people give me a lot of flack because I'm a woman having these discussions, which is something that comes up more and more and more. I've had people tell me that, like, straight to my fucking face, that I wouldn't know anything about this because I am a woman and it's not my responsibility to talk about these things. People press me for resources, I give them the resources. People press me about certain topics, and I give them the answers that they're asking for. It's not like I literally stay later, not getting paid, answering people's questions, because I have a certain amount of hours that I have to fulfill for like my quota. And if I do too many, then it goes over budget and it fucks things over. So I stay later and answer questions for people. So I'm like, yeah, she's upset because people have been like, it's one person that made a complaint and they're like, well, I'm going to like destroy the institution and the reputation of all this stuff. And this was someone who I knew was like having problems with it, because the minute I started talking about union stuff, they were like, I didn't sign up for this. And I'm like, sir, it is literally on our website. Like, it's literally on our website. And I talked about it like at the beginning, like at the very beginning. It is literally in the video. Like, another frustration. I'm gonna be venting for like an hour and a half if I talk about this too much. But long story short, this is within the guidelines of what they wanted me to discuss. I do not stray from those guidelines, and I talk about all aspects of history. All aspects. Architectural history, journalism. Fucking, I talk about whatever the people who are in the audience are most interested in, because that is what you fucking do when you do fucking public speaking that is interactive. Like, that is how you educate. You get them involved. If they're not responding to certain topics, I don't dive into it. I don't try to elaborate, and I never force anything down someone's throat. And I always make sure it's appropriate for the audience that I have. Sometimes I even get historians in there. Actually, oftentimes I do. And when they're there and they're asking questions, I elaborate and I say, after this, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that, because we won't be able to dive as much into it, because I understand that the rest of the audience does not have enough context for those topics to be able to even understand what we're talking about. And I don't want people to feel isolated. So, like, how am I supposed to make it any less when I already like dumbed it down so much? Anyways, I'm just gonna be like venting forever. Yeah. Yeah, but she's just upset because the person was like really upset. They're like, well, they said a ton of lies about stuff that I never did. They're like, oh, she's like saying that, like, because he talks about like, he was like, yeah, she's just trying to promote like liberal agendas or whatever. And he was like screaming at her apparently, and the other workers there, and would not lay off of stuff. So then she has to send me a private like email about stuff which like he doesn't even have to fucking read, telling me that I have to change my way. Like, if you don't want to deal with customers like that, which you are going to deal with, if you are trying to become an academic focused institution, that is something you are going to deal with. This is the state of the world that we are living in. You want to have accurate discussions about union work and about academia, as well as like the history of the state that we're fucking living in, and journalism. Like, all of those things are very, very, very controversial right now, especially with what's going on with like fucking Paramount, the White House, like Trump and all his bullshit trying to censor media. So like, I don't even bring that up. People actively try to bring that up like in my discussions, and I say I can't touch on that a lot, but this is something that is very different than how it used to be, because things used to be filtered out in different ways. I actively avoid the political conversations, and I allow for people to fill in the blanks with what's happening. I don't connect the dots for them. I allow for them to ask questions and connect the dots themselves, because it's not my responsibility to do that. I give the history of the thing that happened, and that is what I give. I do not give anything else. That is what I'm supposed to do, because that is if I add too much of my own personal opinion, it's just going to make it not as palatable for starters, because it's not about me. It's about the information that I'm giving, and that is it. So I'm like, why are you giving any credit to that? Because if you want that to be the standard, you have to do this shit. If you don't want that, then the guidelines for my job has to change. And if that's something that you want to do, sure, fine, do it. Just be sure it's on paper so I can follow through. So that if people get frustrated, I can source that to people. And I can be like, my manager said this is what I can and cannot discuss. Draw a fucking line. This is not like some, like, how am I supposed... And it's not just like, oh, it's a nuanced thing, because no. No, because if you're going to yell at me about stuff when I'm doing what you told me to do, then you need to have the stuff to back it up. That is how life works. And that's why I'm so frustrated, because it's like... Anyways. I'm agitated. Yeah. It's actually like... It's just kind of how it is. And I kind of want to bring it up because I'm no expert in any of this stuff by any means. But I'm also like not like, it's my job to educate about it. So like, what do you want from me? Anyways, going in circles. Not being like super helpful right now. And I'm obviously going to reply later because I just don't understand what to like say to her at this point, because it's like, I don't know what you want from me. Sorry to vent so much. I feel like it's important that I kind of like talk about it because it's hard. Like, it's hard. Anyways, so we've been talking about history of like anarchism and stuff like that, which I think has been really interesting. I have a couple of different videos that we could watch today about like how it kind of came to be, which, is kind of vibey, honestly. But do you want to learn more about the modern day perspective on like anarchism, or do you want to learn more about the historical aspects of anarchism? Because I have both options to go both ways. I think we could learn more about the history stuff, and that would be cool too. Or I also have some interviews that would be interesting to explain how it would be implemented in the modern day. Because the last couple of videos that we watched on Tuesday did dive a little bit deeper into those concepts and perspectives. I'm still pissed. I'm sorry. This will make me feel better. So it's like whatever you want. Because I think anarchism, like we've discussed before, has been something that has existed in society in the past. It just hasn't been a super long-term thing. Do the modern one? Ooh, okay. Okay. And then it'll be a little bit shorter. It's by Sophia Scott Brown. She is an academic kind of in the field. And she has like an interesting perspective on things. She has like debated people on the topic, she's a historian. Let's see where she's from. The East, a University of East Anglia with research interests in modern European political thought and the history of education. And this is by the Institute of Art and Ideas. I sometimes watch their kind of like debates and discussions a little bit. Sometimes they can be a little bit goofy, but I like it. I like it. I am chill, y'all. I'm gonna go get popcorn and like aggressively eat popcorn as we do this, because that's the only thing that's gonna keep me like chill. Man. No, but I think her input is really like interesting. Let me be sure I have captions. Hi, Bixby. Vincent. Yeah. Hmm. And we'll see how it goes. It's probably not going to be like that big of a deal, honestly. Maybe it will be. If it is, lamau. Oh well. We shall see, we shall see. The only complaint I have about the last one was his voice. Talking in one tone over 10 minutes. I muted and read the text. I know. She's way more engaging. She gives more nuanced conversations about the topic. Obviously, she's way more educated on this than I am. Like, it's literally her job to talk about this stuff, so I think it's cool. I think after this, I do have a couple of clips of some videos that I want to share. I think it'd be interesting. But yeah, I think he's pretty, or she's pretty good. Okay. Let's see. All right. Here we go.
Into paradox very, very quickly if I start dictating to you how to
I'm gonna
be free.
turn her up just
we
a
all
little
know
bit.
you can't be forced to be free.
Right.
But what I could do instead is ask, well, in any given situation, how might you increase the amount of freedom that's available to you?
I feel like that's gonna be good for now.
Hi, so Sophie, when most people think about authority and leadership, they tend to think about, big centralized bodies like the state. But in your work, you think of it slightly differently. Could you tell us a bit about that, please?
Yes, I do. So I work a lot on, post-war anarchist thought. And in particular, because anarchism is a very broad church with many different forms of it, and I'm particularly interested in pacifist forms. I'm particularly interested in those forms that are very community-based, very grassroots, very focused around people and direct democracy. And obviously, when you sort of look at these sorts of ideas, these notions of leadership and authority, they take on some new and challenging forms. Now, some people sort of immediately make the assumption, well, it's anarchism, right? By definition, that means there can be no leader or no forms of authority. And in fact, no organisation. In fact, for most people, anarchism is chaos, and it's something to be feared and something to be avoided. But actually, the sort of ideas that I look at have a slightly different take, and they say that actually there's nothing inherently wrong with leadership in and of itself. But there is something wrong when that becomes permanent and that becomes institutionalized. What is more interesting to these kind of thinkers, one of the figures I work on, for example, is an individual called Colin Ward. And he wrote a book called Anarchy in Action, and it was very much based on how in our everyday lives, in our sort of workplaces, in our communities, in our homes, in our families, in our friendship groups, we are constantly busy negotiating or discussing, working out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And we don't actually need to appoint some permanent forms of leadership in order to achieve this. Sometimes, there is that presence in some family structures. They cleave to a very particular form of interaction, perhaps as a male head of the family, perhaps a female. But actually, in many places and circumstances, you don't have that. So I think the interesting thing for me when I was sort of moving through these ideas and working through them was to get rid of this idea you have to eliminate leadership in this sort of great fraternal, cuddly sense of absolutely everyone in agreement. It's it's not necessarily you need to get complete consensus on something. It can be that there is someone who has a particular strength or a particular understanding, a particular insight on something that you want to achieve. And then by all means, people should listen to them. Or if there is a sort of natural sense to which they are able to direct or guide or facilitate something happening, then by all means respect that.
Nice, though.
But the big thing is it doesn't become permanent, and that when things change, and change is possibly the most important factor in this form of anarchy, and acknowledging change and living with the fact that things change in a meaningful way, at some point somebody else is going to be better placed to take that role. So that's the kind of nuance to leadership that I think these anarchist ideas bring.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So In your answer there, you mentioned direct democracy, and obviously,
Yes.
you know, this has been discussed in the UK before. I think maybe the consensus view is that even though the ideal of direct democracy is very worthy, it's something I think people would like to embody, there's a general consensus that it's sort of unlikely to work on the scale of the United Kingdom, even though it might work at more local levels. Could you speak to us about, you know, what does the anarchists say to that kind of worry?
Few interesting points there, but yes, absolutely. It's not just that it's sort of laudable but unrealistic. Some people actually very much don't feel it's laudable at
Time
all.
to
Some
feed the
people
chicken, yeah.
sort of think it's veering towards kind of more dangerous forms of populism, and you can't deny that it does have that within the tradition. There are certain voluntary groups that have existed in history that are spontaneous and cooperative and work for very, very questionable or frightening things, and we are to some degree seeing things like that, and that's something that, you know, I certainly feel that I need to address and confront and not evade. The other big sort of stereotype that goes with it is that if it's direct democracy, then you're going to be having lentils for lunch, there's going to be a drum circle, and at some point the incense is going to be lit. And I'd avoid the brownies if I were you. Yep, that's in there too. It means most stereotypes kind of have sufficient grains of truth in order to keep them perpetuating. And these are sort of factors that...
I kind of want to pause real quick and ask you guys, like, when you think of an anarchist, what do you think of? Because for me, my background in it is a little bit different. And I know the American perspective is a lot different than what she was describing. Like, American anarchists, at least for the most part, nowadays are viewed to be like extremists. Like, almost militaristic. Like, just wanting everything to fall apart and that sort of thing. But I do have some clips of a video that I'll be showing you guys shortly that shows more of like what it used to be here in America, which is very different. I think of a guy out in the woods living off the grid. That's interesting, yeah. Has that always been your perspective? Or is that something that's more recent? Because my view has changed over time, especially like since Black Lives Matter. Honestly, since Bernie running for president in like the 2016 election. Because that word came up a lot, especially when he was talking like in debates and stuff. People would review his debates and they'd be like, oh, he's like an anarchist or whatever. Or he just, what Bernie would say would bring like anarchy or that sort of thing. The dogs are so happy with the popcorn too. I'll give you a second, and then I'll play it if you're answering. If not, that's okay. I used to think that, I don't know, my perspectives changed when I started speaking with more like anarchists as I got older, which they're everywhere. But people always equate it to Marxism, which is actually pretty different. Oh, you also think of sovereign citizen. That's valid. Yeah. They try to do groups and stuff like that, but it's really hard. Especially nowadays with technology.
Do put people off. I think a lot of people don't realise the extent to which they're already practising direct democracy and just not realising it. Like I said in my previous response on the question of leadership, so many times if you are capable of being within a group of friends and organising something or deciding on something, then you're actually capable. Like the raw skills and processes and mechanics of that you've
of an
got them,
individual
they're in
thing.
there. So it's not.
Interesting.
So I sort of push back on the notion that it's impossible.
Hmm.
Human beings living together and
Anarchy
trying to work
revolves
that out is
around,
in
communal
essence
work,
what we're talking
communal
about here.
organizing.
Now, you also mentioned in the question sort of, okay, but how would this work on a United Kingdom scale? And indeed, you know, how would you work that on a kind of global scale? We have to sort of look at the issue. These direct democracy communities, such as might have been envisaged by someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, for example,
He keeps
even
coming
he,
up.
back in the sort of 18th century, said, well, it's too late now. Modern industrial society is too complex. We can't go back to nice little cosy peasant communes, no matter how hard we try. And part of me is attracted to the cosy little peasant commune, apart from the fact that, you know, having grown up in a very rural part of Britain, and the idea of being enclosed in that community, it's not all candle for people. That's all I'm going to say. So, yeah, interesting notion. Now, the sort of anarchism I'm committed to, I could speak to you about federated communities, or, you know, and the fact that far from being anachronistic, you know, these sorts of models of federation. So, for example, you've got Kropotkin's notion of federated communities, slightly updated by, I think, G.D.H. Cole in the mid-century. He talked about guild socialism and those sorts of notions, how you organise sort of a complex modern industrial society through sort of syndicates and workers' control. There are all those models out there, and they're useful to be able to sort of present. The sort of anarchism that interests me the most doesn't really like to kind of paint ideal social orders. For me, it's always far more of a practice. And in this sense, I sort of cheat a little bit. So I say, well, I don't need to worry about how you would necessarily organise or institutionalise direct democracy. Direct democracy, that sort of implies that direct democracy is sort of a means to an end, right. Like the end being, you know, this perfect social order where everything's jolly and lovely and equal and just and all those good things. Now, that would be nice, but actually I sort of come in slightly differently and say, well, for me, direct democracy is kind of the end and the means all in one. So if I can see any opportunity in any space, existing spaces, and new ones, you know, but it's perfectly possible within existing spaces where people can just increase the amount of democratic practices that are available to them with existing means. Now, that to me is a possibly more interesting angle, although it does feel to some people like I'm evading the question of how it might work on a large scale. But I sort of think I would fall into paradox very, very quickly if I start dictating to you how to be free, right? We all know you can't be forced to be free.
Yes.
Right.
But what I could do instead is ask, well, in any given situation, how might you increase the amount of freedom that's available to you? And that would be a good start.
Yeah. So
I think one of the hardest things about discussing anarchism is the fact that with the inherent concept of anarchism, where you don't have some like overarching government that rules everything, right? You have the people ruling themselves. It's hard for us to conceptualize that because throughout human history, or at least Western civilization, there's always been a monarchy. There's always been a theocracy. There's always been something in some form of like moral order, or someone who is seen as more intelligent that dictates everything for the people. So a representative democracy is not necessarily like a democracy, or at least the way that we have it here in America. If you were to have the people vote for, or have the ability to vote for every form of legislation that hits your city council, hits your pardon my language, hits your local governance, like your county, your state, and even the federal legislation, it would basically make a lot of the representatives that we have in power null and void. Although we should have them present information to the public so that we can vote on it. That is not how it's really working. We elect them to represent us, you know? So with an anarchist perspective, you would want the people to have more say in that with voting. So this would happen like on all scales. But there are some like weird things that can happen with like war and that sort of thing. Like obviously you'd want to have educated people represent a nation and stuff like that. but you would have the actual people vote on the things that would be happening. So instead of you being upset like, hey, they're cutting Medicaid, they're cutting Medicare, they're cutting all these things that we view to be important, you would have a say in that, and the actual person would get to vote in that. So you wouldn't have the ability for it to become an oligarchy like how it is nowadays. That's what anarchy is, or how it can be presented. I think that type of anarchy is called like a libertarian municipality, or at least some iteration of that, where you have no like strong organized government and the people are in control of everything. But that's like a whole, you can expand on that a lot.
It's about taking the practices and
Talk
some of
more
the
about that later,
skills
too.
and the activities that we're already engaged in.
Because the whole thing about direct democracy, if it's not voluntary and spontaneous,
She
then
uses
it's
the
not
term direct
demo-
democracy.
So if you invent a new system and say to everyone, this is going to work, you have to do it like this now, that's actually very, it's a logical fallacy. It collapses in on itself immediately. You have to start where people are actually at, with what they're doing, with where they already are, and respecting them as already thinking and intelligent beings that are capable of making decisions, are capable of cooperating, may not want to do it in the pattern or to the order that you've got in mind. And that doesn't mean you tolerate anything. Of course, it's an exchange, it's a discussion. Democracy is that. It's not, for me, democracy is not about achieving a complete consensus, and that's the only means by which it can function.
Right.
It's actually about how you have conflict that's creative rather than catastrophic.
Good. So I wanted to bring you back to the worry that you mentioned, which is that there are some instances of the past, and unfortunately maybe in the future as well, of people using these kinds of methods but coming to form groups that have ideologies or moral views which we now find to be generally sort of abhorrent. And I guess the question I have is, how are we to, without sort of disturbing the democratic nature of this process, how are we to nudge our way off that path? So, for example, I think when you nodded your head to it, the new Italian leader is, further right than maybe some people were hoping across Europe. And there are those sentiments, and I think they need to be taken seriously as a matter of democratic practice, right?
Absolutely.
This is an embodiment of what the people of Italy wanted. But, I, for one, am concerned, and I get the sense many other people too. So how are we going to use this direct democratic procedure to nudge away from some results?
For me, so I think you're going somewhere sort of really interesting here, and the difference maybe in the first instance between liberal democracy as a noun for a set of institutions and a historical formation, a socio-political formation, acknowledges or takes its cues from particular ideas of ancient Greece or the ancient Greek world, for example, and that has had the majority of its concentrated development in the West and in America and places like that, and now finds itself facing a lot of questions and challenges. And then there is a certain degree of irony to which, in order to protect itself, this liberal democracy, capital L, capital D, proper noun, has to actually kind of, to what extent does it feel that it needs to abandon democracy as an adjective or a verb for a certain way of practicing and being and sort of deliberating on decisions, which is what we're essentially talking about when we talk meaningfully about democracy. And it's tricky. So my first port of call with this, the great wave of populism, as it's being referred to, first of all, I think it's difficult to think about it that way and get much further along the tracks. The leader, and it's something the political right has always been remarkably good at, and the political left has always been remarkably bad at. The political right have an ear to the ground more than people realise, and they are very good at picking up perfectly concerns or fears or worries that are not in and of themselves completely unreasonable, and turning them into a very well-crafted rhetorical and political campaign. Margaret Thatcher was, she's someone I used to work on quite carefully was the historian Raphael Samuel, and he once said Margaret Thatcher stole the left libertarians' best lines and used them for the right. She understood
see that to
what
this
people
day.
were objecting to and played that to her advantage. A lot
With
of
the
these
Conservative
movements
Party.
are simply recognizing that many people feel very anxious, worried. They are conscious that they're living in systems that don't seem to be working, that there's a disjunction or distortion between what they are being told should be the case and what they are actually experiencing in their lives. Again, if you sort of drill in and start trying to avoid sort of mass or mob thinking when it comes to populism, you'll have a tiny small minority of people who are hardcore committed to these views and a larger group of people who are not finding any other forms of expression or representation anywhere else, and they are being
And this kind of ties into what we were talking about, like with what you're saying, George. So as we have it right now, people have to pick and choose the things that mean the most about them when they're picking a candidate that matters to them. So like if you have between like Trump and Kamala Harris, or Trump or Biden, or like it doesn't even matter who. You could say like Obama and like whatever. When you have to pick between two candidates, you're going to have a certain amount of like certain topics that are going to matter the most to you. So like let's say if you're like you don't know anything about politics whatsoever, for the most part, you don't stray into that, but you're very like pro-choice or pro-life, you're going to vote for the candidate who aligns with that most likely, because that is the topic that means the most to you. So that's not a true like democracy, because you are forced to compromise on the things that matter to you in order to like have one main goal. And politics aren't necessarily binary. Like there's going to be so many other things that you're going to agree with someone on and disagree with someone on. So like when I'm talking about like people being able to advocate for themselves, and when she's discussing it here, she's talking about how like you can take advantage of those certain things in order to get people to vote your way. And then you could easily kind of like manipulate a institution to be something that it normally wouldn't be, you know? Anyways, George says, if you watch Congress when they vote on bills, they all just vote on an electronic device. If they could figure out how to give a voter the same way of voting, it would solve that problem. Yeah, but you would also have to allow voters to participate in that. Because like right now, voters and what they say does not matter as much as people necessarily think that they do. I've talked about this time and time again, like stuff that's happening in Nebraska, right? So there is a legislation that we as Nebraskans voted on during the major election that we had, or the general election we had back in, I think it was November, right? And that election, we said that people should be able to smoke weed and that sort of thing. And our state institution, our legislation made it so that people did not have the ability to vote in that way. They refused to acknowledge anything. They refused to set a committee to regulate marijuana usage and how it would be sold to the public. And now they're trying to overturn it and make it so that people can't purchase anything aside from a few specific products. Basically making it so that the law is null and void, setting the standards and expectations so high that technically it's legal, but only if you buy it in one specific product. And that's not what the people voted for. And people are rightfully upset about it because they're not being heard and what they say is not being fully accounted for. And that is the flaw within democracy. Am I an anarchist? I don't know. Probably not. But I'm saying that like what we have right now is not like a true democracy in what we think. There's many flaws in it. Anyways, it's really frustrating. But yeah, people should be able to vote for things, and having people vote via paper ballots and stuff like that is really nice, but you should also have like backups too. So you could have things more digitized and stuff, but then there'd have to be increased government regulation. or like a committee that takes over that sort of thing, which is why it can be difficult to have the anarchist kind of governance that most people would want. That's why I would say, I don't know, I think it's a good direction to go in, but in order to get to that point, you have a lot of other things that have to come first. And that's a whole nother discussion. But I'm going to keep this going.
And they're being given dignity and respect by these other sort of sources of power, so they're gravitating towards them. I'm not sure, so in my ideal, having more democracy right now, democracy, the adjective, the verb, would be the best way of protecting the liberal democracy proper noun as a system. That would be what I would advocate, that we have come so far away from a culture where we are willing to listen to people's fears or concerns, especially when they check or go or run counter to what we want to hear. And so that's, for me, that's an important starting place. But it's a frightening one because obviously it takes time. It takes time to win that respect and create those cultures of discussion. And we are living at times where we don't know how much time we have for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds right. And the insight that the right has been better at listening to concerns that people have and turning them into a political campaign, that rings very true. And I mean,
we saw that
Britain,
in 2016, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Thatcher, but it's happening right now. It's happening as we speak in the Cabinet Office. So I thought we could turn to some biographical questions. So you've spoken in the past about your sort of libertarian beginnings, and I wondered if you could...
And this is a different type of
sort
libertarianism.
potted history of how you came to this interest in anarchism and how you came to these views.
So I was definitely an anarchist before I knew I was an anarchist. My mum was a teacher, and she made the cardinal error of teaching both my brother and I to read when we were very, very little, before we started school, and saying to us, if you can read, the world's open to you, you won't need anything else. Oh, she should not have said that. I tried school and found that I didn't like instinctively I reacted against the regimented nature of the day, the fact that I was enclosed, the fact I was told what to read, when to read, how to read it. Before I even had anything resembling a sort of critical or an analytical language for these things, it was just, and I think this is probably the case for many people, it's an instinctive gut reaction. And I had a few choices. I could do what many of my peers did, and sort of, it was the prototype of quiet quitting. So you just go there and you just get through the day and you just wait for break time, lunchtime, and home time. Those are the three highlights of the day. Or another group that just kind of sort of disrupted their own lives by basically rebelling, being sort of badly behaved, what have you. I decided to take a third option, and that was simply I just walked away. I continued to reject or refuse. It was it was my first example of resistance, I suppose, and I was very lucky. I had understanding parents, and here's where the direct democracy came in. They were both of them willing to hear my point of view, even as a child. And the point I was always told, you can make your case. You're going to receive criticisms on it, but if you can make your case, if you put your point across, we will listen. That was the deal. No guarantees and agreement, but certainly I got a hearing. And so one way or another, somehow I managed to sort of struggle through the 18 years. I took the exams fairly independently, so I had a very in and out, very checkered, very minimal relationship with formal education. And now I come to look back, and I think that was sort of extremely important. From a very young age, I got very used to being very self-reliant, from deciding what I was going to read, how I was going to learn. If I had been forced through school, I think my passion and enthusiasm for all that sort of thing would have been completely extinguished, pretty much annihilated by the time I got to 18. The fact that I was choosing what to pursue and how. And in that process found that things that I wouldn't normally have wanted to do, like mathematics or science, they weren't sort of natural things for me. But through needing to know, wanting to know about certain things, I sort of quite organically found myself just being interested in everything and seeing the value and the potential value.
I think she's really
everything.
interesting.
So that, in a very everyday, boring, non-exciting way, was the roots of it. And that's why I suppose when I come across radicalism, capital R, glamorous chic, you know, sort of with all your sort of factions and groups, and that's not the sort of culture that that I kind of gravitate towards. It is strongly sort of individualist in my case, but never sort of in the isolated individual. It's my way of constantly moving through the world and being a part of the relationships and the interactions that I'm in, rather than simply going along with anyone else's other pattern of life.
That leads me to my final question. So I wanted to ask, and in fact there might actually be two questions here now. So obviously I'm sure there are lots of thinkers that you would have liked to meet that you never had the chance. So I was going to ask, what sort of historical anarchist figure would you like to have a sort of lively dinner conversation with, and what would you choose to speak about? But perhaps there are two questions, in the sense that maybe one answer for a younger version of yourself, you know, who was experiencing this passion for certain projects and certain things, finding school education stifling, and then now someone who's embraced this knowingly, you know, self-knowledge of what you are and how it fits with anarchism and where you fit in the anarchist community.
Well, so my younger self, once I got to the point where I realised that there could actually be sort of politicised ways of talking about how I was feeling, and going towards those early kind of that classic George Woodcock history of anarchism, which is sort of, I don't think any student could have got through the 60s without having a copy. I would hope not. But that was actually really important. And that book is, I mean, within the anarchist canon, it does the useful job of setting out the ancestors. So it's got Kropotkin in there, and it's got Bakunin, and it's got Proudhon, and it's got Tolstoy, and you know, it's not compulsory to come from Russia and have a great beard if you're an anarchist, but it helps. And I suppose for me, any figure from that book, I was a bit disappointed that there weren't too many sort of really interesting sort of female figures. Emma Goldman is obviously a sort of interest, but I suppose when I was younger, that was quite important to have this sort of sense of a deep history, and these quite glamorous, exciting figures with their sort of big ideas and mutual aid. And so I suppose if I was to narrow it down, when I was younger, I think it would have to be Kropotkin sort of thing. But now, actually, in the sort of work I do a lot of work through intellectual biography, because to me it's a really useful way of showing how the individual is never an isolated, private, separate entity. That actually, if you look at biography, if we tell the story of our lives, we can't do that without showing all the social relationships and interactions that go into forming any one life. And so the thinkers I look at now are really interesting from that respect. So Colin Ward, for example, Raphael Samuel, E.P. Thompson, and at the moment I'm doing a lot of work on figures like who you wouldn't even, and who would never have called themselves anarchists, people like G.D.H. Cole or Isaiah Berlin. Now, before I'm not saying for one moment that they were anarchists, but what's really interesting about what these people are trying to do is what I'm trying to do. It's work out how to be politically committed without having to have all the answers, and work out how actually democracy, the conditions for democracy as a concept are satisfied by practice. You don't always have to have the finished result to say that you are experiencing radical democracy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we might wrap up there.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
So that was kind of like a modernist perspective of anarchism, and I'm gonna give you guys the link again. I totally forgot to post it. It was posted in 2023, and I am interested. I don't know if she's done any more interviews after this, but I'm gonna look into that later. regarding like anarchism and how it could be implemented now. Like she has done an interview with the Armin show, which I haven't fully watched, but this is the most recent one. Um, I don't know. I think she's going to become more prevalent in the next couple of years. Yeah, she's a good speaker. She needs to be more confident though in her posture and like demeanor, but aside from that, I think she's like doing a really good job. Yeah, I think she'll dive. I'm excited to listen to this one. It's an hour long though, so we don't really have the time to do that today. But I will be I'll be diving a bit more into that later. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, what did you think about all this? You don't have to like talk about it a lot, and that's okay if you like don't want to. But I find her commentary to be a lot more palatable and easier to comprehend than like how people see anarchism nowadays. I think that the word anarchism has gotten like a really bad rap. Like I found a YouTube short which I know seems like really silly. I don't know if I like, let me see if I can still find it. If I can't find it, then I'll be okay. Oliver, you're fine. He's so frustrated right now. He's like, but yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about like my old political standing and stuff like that and like what my current perspective is, but I was a lot more like I would say more anarchist when I was younger. And I would say nowadays, I think it has its place. I think it's more of a transitional thing. I do think that because we have things like nukes and very large scale weapons of like mass destruction, it would be hard to have those still existing and have an anarchist kind of like framework of governance. And it's not that I want it to be that way. I just think that that's a very big factor. Because it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Yeah. I feel like this is like a good. You're gonna think this is silly, but I think it's like worth it. I'm gonna show you this like YouTube short. And it does kind of explain like how people like see anarchism depending on like what perspective you have. It's so silly. Look at this. But it's true though. So this would be like libertarianism as we hear about it in America more. And leftist anarchism is kind of like what I've been describing and what Miss Sarah was describing in her interview. But yeah, it's like I don't know. I think that it can be a little bit hard to navigate different types of like anarchism. So here's like another good video about like libertarianism.
If you're busy building your anarchist utopia,
which I think is like very helpful.
If you're busy building your anarchist utopia, get back to work. I'm not going to interrupt you, but this is one possible way that you could structure it. Let's talk about libertarian municipalism. Libertarian municipalism is an impossible phrase to say. It is really annoying and it's clunky and unwieldy, but it's kind of a cool idea. And by the way, libertarian is the European sense, not the American sense. They are wildly different things. Libertarian municipalism is the idea that municipalities are run through direct democracy. So picture your hometown, a small town, and every decision that's internal is voted on with absolute direct democracy. Everybody who wants to vote gets to vote. Everyone has a say directly in the running of their little community, their municipality. What happens when you have an issue that affects a bunch of different municipalities? Well, then you have a loose confederation of municipalities, and you have a quick council that comes together. Each municipality sends somebody to that council who is fully accountable to the population in that municipality and is recallable at a moment's notice. This is an idea that comes from the thinker, one of the most interesting and radical thinkers of the 20th century, Murray Bookchin, who wrote a very famous book called The Ecology of Freedom that right now we're doing on the reading feed. Plug, plug, plug. Follow YouTube, Patreon, all that good stuff. But Bookchin was trying to build democracy into a society, like build institutionalized direct democracy in a very real way. And this is a really, really interesting idea. There's a lot more to this, and we do talk more about this on that series of videos that I'm doing built around the ecology of freedom. But give me a sense of what you think. Let me know, this quick introduction to kind of how this could possibly work. What are you thinking? Let me know here in the comments directly. I'm always happy to answer those. And thank you for watching.
I don't know, I think he does like a really good job like explaining this. But let me link it so everybody can see it. There you go. There you go, there you go. Sources, important. But yeah, yeah, he did. It was, I was looking for hours trying to find like just a short video to just bring all this together. But I really enjoy like a lot of things relating to like anarchism, which the one thing I struggle with is that there's so many different types of anarchism that the overall public doesn't necessarily understand what it really is and how it could be implemented. Like, when you talk about it in this way, like how I've been framing it in today's video, it sounds a lot more appealing. It sounds really nice. It sounds like something that you would actually probably be willing to see in like modern day society and not be super upset about. So there are like a couple, like I said before, nukes is a factor that would be really difficult to navigate. Though like most of the entire world has had agreements stating that they won't have nukes or anything, the process of disarming the current like nuclear system would be really difficult. And once you have a set of like technology and you get to like a certain stage and stuff, you can't really go back in time and regress back to before that technology existed. You know that it can exist or it could always exist again, and that potential will exist. So it's like, how do you navigate anarchism when you have complications like that? And that's like the biggest thing that I can think of that would make it kind of like almost null and void. Because how can you have that and not have like standard forms of governance, or at least some form of standard of governance that would be in control of that? And that's why I think that I'm more of like that I think that like a democracy can still exist, but I think that there needs to be more power to the people, which I have talked about on my channel over and over and over and over and over again. Like, I talk about it constantly. It's not really something that you can absolutely avoid. I don't know. Do you have any other questions about it? I do have another video that we can watch about more of the history and why things are the way that they are. But it's kind of long. Yeah, no way to do away with all government. Yeah, exactly. Which is why, like, I get worried. Oh my gosh. I bet I could. Oh, my neck is so tight. But it's why I get worried when people talk about, like, having small government and stuff like that. But then putting more and more finances into military and stuff. Because there are fine lines that, like, the government can cross into. And you should allow some social issues to be more social issues. But the government should be there to protect people and allow for them to have differing opinions, even if it's something that people don't necessarily agree on. But if you're going to harm another person with something, then yeah, that's another discussion, you know? It's very nuanced and it's very complicated. It's not like a black and white conversation. Like, how do I say this? George says, I think it would be hard to get the smaller community to convert to what he was talking about. Or having like municipalities and stuff. I think that's actually a lot easier than people would like to believe. Like having the terminology of direct democracy, I believe is a lot more accurate than saying like what he was saying. They have very similar concepts, like what he was saying versus like what Miss Sarah was saying. But where he, or at least where she kind of strays, is utilizing the existing system that we have and modifying it to be better, which I'm a big proponent of. I like hearing her discussions because I agree with her there. I think we do have like a set standard in society that if you want things to get better, you have to use what you have. But his conversation more so focuses on like getting rid, or at least like abolishing the current system that we have and then replacing it with something else. So on Tuesday, we were discussing different types of anarchism. We had some more like where people could just like destroy things or steal things and that's whatever because the laws shouldn't matter and that sort of thing. Or you had more green focused anarchism, which would have like a standards of society where people focus more on mutual aid and they kind of revert back to a society before we had modern technology and stuff. And even on Tuesday, I discussed how living in a society without having any form of like corruption would mean that we would have to give up a lot of amenities that we really, really like. So like iPhones being cheap or any form of technology being cheap. Harvesting resources, having things like consumerism as it is now would not be able to exist if we were to have authoritarian utopia. It just wouldn't be able to exist. And even the more conservative, like, authoritarianism that I was showing you in the YouTube short, where you have, like, all the militaristic stuff, that would not be able to exist if you did not have access to certain resources, which rely on consumerism and exploitation of people and demographics of people, which... Oh, we could go like really deep into the weeds of a lot of this conversation, like really, really, really deep. And I don't necessarily want to. But we could if you guys want to. But yeah. Oh, there's an ad right now. But yeah. I think getting smaller communities to convert to stuff would be easier than we think if you frame it in the right way. So framing it as like, oh, you're going to be able to vote for everything that's like hitting whatever, that would be good. But in order to instate that and be sure that it's enforced, it would have to be done with the existing, within the frameworks of our existing democracy. So starting at the lower level, making it so that there's like legislation that states that every single city has to allow its citizens to vote on public infrastructure, like having that be like a regulation, and then working your way up from there. Some may say that that's too slow, which I respect that argument, but if you want it to be secure, you have to slowly introduce stuff like that to the public, and then it's like exponential growth. George says, for example, I live in a community of 186 homes. Last year during the homeowner meeting to vote on fellow neighbors to the board and vote on plans, I was the only person who showed up. No interest from anybody. Sad. Yeah. Was it something that was like published to everybody too? Because I know that can be a factor. But that is like an important like starting position too. you would have to have the existing systems give people incentive as well. So in Australia, which is like an amazing example, which I've brought up so many different times, to get people to vote more, they give them like tax breaks and tax incentives. They also have like a thing where they give them free hot dogs, which is kind of weird, but like it's just they have like barbecues outside of like polling places that people just eat at, and it can be free. And sometimes you have to pay for it, but sometimes it's just completely free. It depends on your community and where you're voting. Like here, I've been a part of like at least Nebraska and like the city I grew up in, as well as here, the election processes. And we don't have a lot of incentive. You get a sticker, and you're not even guaranteed like a day off. Like it's not even a national holiday, you know? George says, hey, I'll take a free hot dog. Yeah, exactly. But it's true. Like we could have more incentives here to make it work. It's just it's not something that has become popular in our society. And it's really disappointing. I wish it did. I really, really did wish it did. It's something that like when I think about it, I get like really frustrated because I want it to be a lot better. But it's hard to have things be better. Okay, wait, okay. I also have another video I want you to see, which I think is very like helpful. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I feel like we could take steps to be more like that, and then that like terminology would be called like a direct democracy, but it does have its roots in like anarchism, you know? And it's just, it has such a bad rap here in the States. It's kind of sad. But such is life. It's just how it is. Oh, my goodness. I'm so tired. I also have to go pee. I've been getting up a lot. It's because I had so much water today. Let me... Wait, will I be able to move this? Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. This is a little democracy... This is a little documentary on anarchism in America. It was made in 1983, and it kind of... There's lots of really good interviews in it about how people's perspectives were on the topic at the time. And I think I'm at the right spot in the video, so I'm going to like watch it with you guys for a second, just to be sure that I'm on. I'm not going crazy. If it's really loud, I'm sorry.
When they have power and authority, they don't give a damn about nobody. They prostituting the island, milking the land dry. They making my people starve.
This is a song that has its own history, but I'm not going to dive into.
Take it over, my friend. Take it over.
Obviously, around the Cold War.
We're doing a film about anarchism in America. Is there an anarchist influence in the anti-nuke movement?
No doubt about it. There's a lot.
Sorry, there's no subtitles.
But it's manifested itself not so much in explicit opposition to the state as such, which is the most common form of anarchism, but in a way of operating that isn't centralist, where people who participate in these demonstrations and want to change their lives do so on a participatory basis rather than taking orders from central authorities. That's the way it tends to go. I mean, it's not that that's always successful, but there's that tendency towards decentralism, a tendency towards consensus operation, and at least from my perspective, a tendency to a strong nonviolent perspective, because I think the state is the ultimate violence. And so to see that nuclear power is violent, nuclear power is centralized, and we want to have a certain technology, we want to have another society where centralism of that sort, that authoritarianism is dissolved and is more responsive to people's needs. You can't block off the road?
You can't block off the road.
Oh, no, we're not going to block the road.
You don't understand. If we let you drive down there, we're going to have to let everybody else drive down there too, right?
I don't know.
We can't have 1,000 cars down there.
You seem to have the power to do what you want.
No, we ain't doing what we're told to do.
You're going to take a chance on the cars being towed away.
Anarchist forms of organization.
This is important. That's what I'm saying.
A style of organizing that includes the input and decision-making of everyone who is affected, but also anarchist organizing and decision-making would involve people taking the results of their decisions directly and acting on them, rather than having somebody else do the work for them. That it's participatory in decision-making and in action. And that direct action element, which is embodied within many of the civil disobedience actions in the anti-nuclear movement, such as blocking construction of nuclear power plants.
Which is what they're doing here.
Anarchists have, my understanding of anarchism has as part of its element a connection between ends and means. To me, if one is an anarchist, then from my point of view, one also must be nonviolent. And if one is nonviolent, one must be an anarchist. I see the linkage is very clear.
Which this perspective is kind of changed.
Is a person who believes in nonviolence, is a person who believes that the sort of society we want to achieve is a society without violence, without wars, and without injustice. And to use wars, violence, and injustice to achieve that society is to be counterproductive.
You just immediately erect.
Yeah.
Think it's legal for you to talk to the people on the other side of the fence?
Doesn't matter. They'll do what they want, legal or not.
So do they put the cuffs on tight? So how do you feel now that you've gotten arrested, you?
Wet.
Just now?
Very wet.
Other than wet?
What did they think was that they want to get arrested? That's like the thing. They're trying to prove a point that like you're not allowed. Like
The basic problem
I really wanted to show this so that like there can like when people protest things, this is also something that's kind of important, but when people protest things, they don't always mind being arrested because that's kind of part of the point, or at least specifically here it's part of the point. So they're upset that they're not allowed to have any say in whether or not the nuclear facility is being constructed. It doesn't matter if they protest, it doesn't matter if they do whatever, it's still going to happen regardless. And unless they directly sabotage the infrastructure, or it being built by like maybe destroying the machinery or whatever, there's nothing that they can do to make it stop. Like, and I thought this was a really important thing to see because there's different like perspectives of anarchy. So like when I was, or at least there are different ways of protesting. Some are considered more violent and some are considered not violent. So like when I was in Hawaii and there was a lot of protests surrounding a forest being taken down where a lot of people lived. It was public land, which was very, very difficult to come by on an island, right? That is so densely populated. And what the people did is they decided to actively like destroy the machinery that would tear down the wooded areas, which is harder to come by and harder to repair because they live on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So that is a different approach than what they're doing here. Here they're passively doing stuff because most of the infrastructure has already been built out and they're basically too late. And they're trying to do it peacefully, which one could raise the question, can you have any change if you're just doing it peacefully? If you're just standing there and trying to be like, oh, well, I'm standing here or I'm walking out of here, then like, is that really going to bring the change that you want to have happen? Or do you need to do something more? And this isn't me being like call to action. It's just me pointing out that there's different types of anarchy that can come into play. And it also depends on like, is how far the person's willing to go. George says, I think they got what they wanted. They have been no new nuclear plants since 1983. But. Yeah, the Chernobyl disaster happened in 1986. It more had to do with Chernobyl than it had to do with like any other thing happening, because that's when the government was like, oh wait, maybe it's not good. Peaceful protests were like, I guess, a factor, because then people knew, like, peaceful protests are really helpful for educating people on like how many people around them believe in like the same perspective. It doesn't, and it can be really good for like networking and stuff, but it doesn't inspire like a direct like change. Yeah, the Russian nuclear incident. Yeah, what happened in Chernobyl. That's pretty much why. It had nothing really to do with the protests, and had more stuff to do with like large scale public perception. Because you had protests like yeah, like the Keystone Pipeline. Let's see. That was something that was really like popular for a long time, and people protested it, they got arrested and stuff like that. But what caused the Keystone Pipeline to not be built didn't really have a lot to do with the protesters. Which, I mean, it made people feel more enabled to do things, but it's the fact that like, let's see. I have like a little link to it. Yeah, President Joe Biden signed an executive order on January 20th, 2021 to revoke the permit that granted the TC Energy Corporation for the Keystone Pipeline Phase 4. So they did start building it and they started doing things, but like the protests really didn't cause a lot of stuff. It was more like it brings public awareness to things for sure, but it doesn't stop anything. It's the actual people in legislative power that have the control to stop things, which that's like that's a complicated, layered discussion. But yeah, I just wanted to point it out because some anarchists are like, oh, you have to have direct change. You need to like have more action, and you need to be the reason that it stops, and you need to stop everything physically if you want it to stop. Because there's plenty of movements where people have protested and nothing's happened. Like think about like what's happening in Gaza, with all of the Palestinians being forced from their homes and the genocide that's been happening there. So many people have been protesting it, but the government has been stifling it out. And a lot of organizations have been stifling it out and silencing it. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you protest a lot of things, because it doesn't always bring change. It's like the people in legislative power have to be inspired to bring change on their own. So the power isn't really in the people's hands, you know? George says, I've seen protests for all kinds of things over the last 50 years. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I always like, when I talk to people who are anarchists or who are interested in it, I'm always interested to see like what their spin on it. Like, do you think that can be achieved peacefully, or do you think there needs to be more of a violent overthrow that has to happen in order to make those changes occur? I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna let it play while I go pee.
What I really have is that whenever I meet leftists and the socialist and Marxist movements, I'm called the petty bourgeois individualist. I'm supposed to shrink under this. Usually I'm called the petty bourgeois individualist by students and by academicians who've never done a day's work life in their entire biography, whereas I have spent years in factories and in trade unions, in foundries and in auto plants. So after I have to swallow the word petty bourgeois, I don't mind the word individualist at all. I believe in individual freedom. It's my primary and complete commitment in individual liberty. That's what it's all about. That's what socialism was supposed to be about, or anarchism was supposed to be about, and tragically has been betrayed. And when I normally encounter my so-called colleagues on the left, socialists, Marxists, communists, they tell me that after the revolution they're going to shoot me. That is said with unusual consistency. They're going to stand me and Carl up against the wall and get rid of us real fast. I feel much safer in your company.
The Libertarian Party is a classical liberal party. And the classical liberal parties believe that people are good, that people can take care of themselves, and that the best way to create a better society is to have smaller government and lower taxes. So we would reduce taxes, we would reduce spending, we would reduce overseas military commitments, and we'd take government completely out of the whole regulation of lifestyles.
There's a lot of confusion between the terms anarchist and libertarian. What's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist?
I think if you mean by anarchy, disruption and violence, why the Libertarian Party has nothing to do with it, because we think that our program will create a more peaceful society.
I don't mean in the derogatory use of the term anarchist, but say in the way Murray Bookchin or other left-wing anarchists look at the ideology. Serious anarchist. Is there a difference between that kind of anarchist and a libertarian?
Well, I think the whole Libertarian Party is aiming toward very major cuts in government, a very much smaller government, and I don't think that as a political movement, libertarians envision no government as an immediate alternative.
Well, it's hard to tell on the basis of the party's rhetoric, because after all, they're running for a state office. But my experience is that most people who are in the Libertarian Party have pretty decent anarchist impulses. Even if they do not say that they're anarchists, most of them will say they are libertarians at any rate. And one thing that is useful is that they have a fairly well-refined analysis of why they aren't conservative. It took the New Left to do a proper analysis of American liberals, it seems to me, and I suspect that the libertarians are doing the best analysis of American conservatives. I think that they're quite good people, and that the party contains within it probably more people of an anarchist tendency than any other organization in the country.
This is kind of what I was touching on yesterday.
Libertarianism has its roots in American individualism. Although American individualism developed independently of European anarchism, both ideologies shared a profound contempt for government. Unlike the European anarchists, the individualists believed that people had the right to own private property, as long as it had been obtained by their own labor. Benjamin Tucker, editor of the prominent anarchist newspaper Liberty, denounced the capitalist monopoly of money, land, and tariff, and advocated peaceful change, not armed revolution.
Guided by these individualist principles, Josiah Warren founded two cooperative communities, Utopia in 1844 and Modern Times in 1851. Many of the 19th century individualists were also advocates of free love. Ezra and Angela Hayward of Massachusetts were outspoken critics of marriage and the subjugation of women. They were harassed and arrested numerous times for publishing and distributing writings on birth control and sexual freedom.
Individualism was also at the root of a number of homesteading experiments. One of its key theorists was Ralph Bersotti, who believed the only viable social organization was a society of homesteaders who were self-sustaining and who could live without interference from government. Mildred Loomis, one of Bersotti's associates, became a homesteader in the 1940s.
Having grown up on a Nebraska farm, I didn't know anybody was poor or anybody was in need. I was a very naive person when I hit New York City in my graduate work, though I began to be very puzzled by what was called the Great Depression. Remember that? No?
I've heard of it.
You, fortunately, didn't struggle with that. But then's when I really began to question and to be aware of what I call the legal, the government system. Maybe you can understand.
The crow, or not the crow, the chicken.
I had a great dream there on the Nebraska farm that if I were to have what I really wanted, I would be a secretary to what? A congressman in Washington, D.C. But by the time I met Ralph Rissotti working there in Dayton, I had question after question to think through.
Rooster's raising hell, I know.
All of this centers around homesteading. What principles are there in homesteading that are important?
Well, I would say, in one word, it's responsibility. I think a person who is responsible, and by ethics and by the whole natural setting, must be responsible for his own survival. And wherever that is violated by government or business or education or cities or anything at all, where responsibility
oh shit, Naked Child. Jesus. Oh my god. I was not paying attention. I have not watched this part. Fuck. I was like, I'm never gonna have like anything like that happen on Twitch. Well, this VOD's gonna go down. Damn it.
We think it's a mistake.
Do you see any
Okay, I'm gonna like keep an eye on it.
between what you're trying to do and anarchism?
Oh
my God. If you mean Gilbert Tucker, Benjamin Tucker's anarchism, yes, by all means. Because I, years ago, was thrilled by his way to get rid of the monopoly and the exploitation and get it into voluntary association. Sure, I'm all for that.
That's why you've had everything beforehand.
I'm not afraid of the term anarchism, if that's what you mean.
That is what we mean.
Oh my god.
But you know, if it's one of these bomb-throwing collectivists against everything, then we question the use of that term. But for good, straight, voluntary, do-it-yourself,
I'm paying attention now.
we can handle, we can cope, yes.
Great.
Okay, to be fair, not to be fair, like obviously a naked child is not okay. They also, like, South Park showed Naked Trump. So, why? I don't know. Am I gonna get a strike on my channel now? It was an accident. I don't think I will. You. Anyways.
There's an instinctual anarchism.
I promise that one's anybody know.
And it goes
Moving
back
on,
to
moving on.
There's a real yearning for self-reliance.
There's not going to be any more children in this.
Vermonters, new and old. I mean,
or at
that's
least
what
not.
they're up here for, living in these hills. So they appreciate. They're doing it. They may not call it anarchism, but they're doing a lot of the things we talk about.
Like oh yeah, Vermont has like
well, the first was being
I mean, this is like when Bernie started getting more involved in politics, so.
Alternatives that meet your needs rather than accepting
there is a big movement in Vermont.
Society as it is when you're born into it. In this little town, it's not a very big town, the people have organized a community center that shows films for adults and for children, that has potluck suppers, theatrical performances, meetings there.
Talking about mutual aid and community engagement.
Latent anarchy, the beginnings of anarchy in New England town meetings, in volunteer fire departments, in food cooperatives, that people are responding to a desire to control their own lives, not be told what to do and how to think, and to be managed and bossed around, but to find ways in which they can take care of their needs, their material and emotional needs, within small groups on a small scale, where there can be direct democracy, and so where people do have a sense of really participating and really controlling their own destiny.
You hear that terminology over and over again. Like, the terminology direct democracy is used very, very often as an alternative form of saying anarchy. And that's because it is a form of anarchy, like basically a conclusion of like the anarchist kind of movement and perspective. But or at least one of them, which is cool. North Carolina.
Well,
factories you work in?
it makes it different because each worker has an opportunity to say whatever she likes, she or he likes to, in any of the business part. In our holiday pay, our vacation, or whatever. If we make a loan, that the workers, each individual, each operator has a say. We have to contact everybody. Workers' own is different from all other plants I've ever worked, because usually the head people, the manager and personnel committee takes care of everything. Right here, the workers take care of everything.
That make a difference?
That makes a difference. You build your own business, and then you work it like you want to. You know, and you become a part of it, and it's your business.
It's a cooperative.
You're not working for the other man, you're working for yourself.
Is there a different sense of community among the workers here than?
Well, I think the communication is great, because there isn't another one in this area, and everybody, well, you know, we're just starting, so they'll begin to get the feel of it. You know, I think if in another year's time, we'll be.
A lot of these cooperatives are no longer in service because of modern day technology. People just sell things online on their
I'm
own now.
strongly committed to it because I feel.
But there is strength in numbers, and people are starting to realize that again.
What I put into it is what I get
And you're
out of
seeing a resurgence. But they're not called
Decentralism and
cooperatives.
self-management are at the
In the
heart of the
same way.
anarchist philosophy. Anarchists pose the question, why should the decisions which affect our lives be made in a remote, centralized seat of government? It doesn't make sense. People should administer their own lives, not relegate responsibility to somebody else.
The town meeting, the block association, the factory committee, these are all examples of anarchist types of organizations.
One of the things that struck me most when I went to Europe was, and lived there for a couple of years, was how fucking law-abiding the people were, and how I broke all the laws. And I think I didn't break the laws so much because I was an anarchist, and it was just because I was an American.
This
I mean,
is
if I came
true.
to a traffic light, nobody was there. I went through the goddamn thing. It was just an attitude, you know. What's the point of staying here, you know?
This is a very
If I
big
could,
American
you know, if I get
perspective,
out
by
on
the
the
way.
left-hand side, and I found that my European neighbors.
Like, America's roots are in and of itself in a lot of anarchist foundations. Like, the whole American Revolution was spurred by a call to change and trying to make things more regulated by the people. Well, kind of, not really. But at least that was the message that a lot of people were given in order to be motivated for the cause. Like, the overall perspective that an American generally has and why people get so frustrated with us is that, oh, everybody else has to follow the rules, but I don't have to follow the rules. And we idolize people who don't follow rules and regulations and are able to be successful in not following those laws and regulations. Just look at Trump. He actively has broken so many laws and has gotten into so much trouble for all of the shit that he's done, and people still idolize him, and they're very happy about the stuff that he's done. They're like, yeah, but you know, it's all worth it because he's in the position that he's in. So it's like the rules for thee, but not for me kind of mentality, which is really toxic.
Went crazy. Stay in line.
But it's also like very anarchist.
Constantly stay in line, be this way, queue up in England, you know.
Oh,
I'd say fuck you.
the only difference is because that's what people call individualism, or yeah. And the only difference between that and anarchy is whether or not you have to focus on yourself or people around you, including yourself. That's like the big difference.
You know, the first one to the bus
or
gets
one
on,
of
you know?
them.
And it was this sort of this crazy American attitude that I had, you know. And I think it was very American that we are a people who are very smart, you know, that we got a lot of street smarts. I mean, we know what the law is all about. We know who made it and how it gets enforced. I mean, I think if you stop the average American and say, what's the law all about? Did God make it? You say, oh, bullshit, God didn't have anything to do with it. You know who made it. John D. Rockefeller made it.
How can you tell an American? Has he any distinguishing flavor? Could you spot him on an elephant in Turkestan, floating on a raft 50 miles at sea, as you'd know a single leaf from the sassafras tree by its characteristic savor? It isn't that he's short or tall. It isn't that he's
You're chasing after a fucking pig, Jesus Christ.
It isn't that he's civilized.
Trying to hunt down cops would be like.
Or the head size of his hat. No, it's just that he hates and eternally despises the policeman on his beat and the judge at his assizes, the sheriff with his warrants and the bureaucratic crew, for the sole and simple reason that they tell him what to do. And he insists on eating, he insists on drinking, he insists on reading, he insists on thinking, free of governmental snooping or a governmental plan. And that's an American.
Look at those fucking pants, yo.
This is the first rodeo you've been to?
No, this is the second time. We just moved to Truckee last year. Yeah.
And you enjoy it?
It's a great event every year.
So you plan to come back next year?
Obviously, yeah.
The child's just like,
something about the rodeo
okay.
is uniquely American, and it's something that says about the American character.
Independence and individual ruggedness. That's probably the cowboy, the idea of the cowboy still. Yeah.
Yeehaw.
Let me just get over on the boulevard here a little bit. Just kind of rest here a little bit. We haven't had any chargeable accidents in all my life, and I don't want to run into some neighborhood kid here coming out of school right now or something. I think we're riding in a 1976 Kenworth. It's one of them bicentennial trucks. They came out with this bicentennial truck for our 200th birthday. They made 200 of them. That's the reason for the red, white, and blue decoration on it. Basically, the running gear, the transmission, the engine, the rear ends are all standard type truck equipment. There's nothing extra super special about it. Just a 350.
Lil John.
Yeah, I guess you'd say I'm independent. I don't owe no allegiance to anybody, and whatever the way I can regulate my operation is either make or lose money in the whole operation.
So in that sense, you're independent, but are there other ways in which you're not independent?
Well, we're really not independent because you talk about independent truck drivers, and then you get into the
You look so Amish.
into the political bureaucracy
like
that
the
we
chin
run out
strap
of
beard.
the United States government there in Washington, D.C., and mainly in the rules and regulations. I mean, I don't think a man in Washington, D.C. can dictate to me how to operate this truck.
But they do, don't
Financially, right. Now, that's what I'm saying. That's why I say we've got educated, smart in Washington, D.C. telling us guys, and it's hard for me to explain to somebody or make anybody understand that if you leave me alone, I'll make a darn good living for myself and put a good piece of equipment on the road, given the opportunity. I'm not out here just using this as an excuse to get from point A to point B or from party to party. I'm out here to make a good living, raising 4 children with it. Got a wife, got a decent house there in Colorado Springs. And if the government would leave me alone and back off on some of the rules and regulations, I could do even better. That's what I'm saying. There's a, you know, just because you get elected to an office or you become a political
So you probably remember this kind of
vibe
in society.
Don't necessarily make you
That's cool.
the big brother that's got to oversee everything that's under your domain. And that's what's happening in Washington, D.C. The people out there feel that they got to be the Big Brother act, that we're not smart enough down here to do our own thing.
One of the things that we're asking people and trying to explore in the film is not just the explicit anarchism of the individualists of Warren and Tucker and Spooner, but to find out whether there's kind of an implicit anarchism in American traditions and American political history. What's your feeling about that?
Well, I think there's an implicit anarchism in any of the American tendencies that have organized people in opposition to the state. And I think co-ops might have reflected this notion, organizing people not only in opposition to the state, in effect, but in opposition to the major economic movement of the time.
The pin it again.
I think, as a matter of fact, just in the romantic view of the American character, there's an anarchist tendency. It is flawed by one thing, the abstraction of patriotism. People who will damn the government from morning till night and oppose the state in 1,000,001 ways will, at times of national crisis, become incredibly patriotic and begin to say they will do anything for the state, and they begin to talk of duty, service, sacrifice, all of the words that are the worst words in the world, it seems to me, in a human sense. They begin talking about. Now, I don't know why this is, unless it is that these are such good-hearted people that they really believe that the American state is totally different from any other state, and it's certainly somewhat different, and that they feel that it is important to preserve. They feel they're preserving the country, but the only language that is available is to preserve the state. I have an idea that one of these days there will be another language in which we can talk about preserving the country, the landscape, the neighborhoods, the people, and the communities, without talking about preserving the state. At which point there'll be a lot of radical farmers, factory workers, and small-town residents in this country.
I think it's interesting because our small towns have been like liquidated, basically. Like they don't exist anymore.
2nd, 1937. For a month now, wandering over the Sierras, a poem has been gathering in my mind. Details of significance and rhythm the way poems do, but still lacking a focus. Last night I remembered the date, and it all began to grow together and take on purpose. We sat up late while Denham moved over the zenith, and I told Marie all about Boston, how it looked that last terrible week, how hundreds stood weeping impotent in the streets that last midnight. I told her how those hours changed the lives of thousands, how America was forever a different place.
Kind of missed out some of the context being built.
For many.
That's
in the morning we swam in the cold, transparent lake, the blue, damselflies and all the reeds like millions of narrow metallic flowers, and I thought of you behind the grill in Dedham Vanzetti, saying, who would ever have thought we would make this history? Someday mountains will be named after you in Saco. They will be here in your name.
Hey, Randall. Hey, I hope that was fun.
When these days are but a dim remembering of the time when man was wolf to man. I think men will be remembering you a long time, sitting on mountains, many men, a long time. Comrade.
That was interesting. That's good. I'm glad. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, psycho, psycho, oh, Niccolo, psycho.
This is a funeral procession, by the way.
Psycho. I just want to sing your name. Psycho, 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 psycho.
I feel like you should watch this documentary if you have time. I listened to it, but I obviously didn't watch it visually.
Beginning with the First World War, an alliance of the Departments of Justice, Labor, and Immigration initiated a campaign of repression. Agents broke into the homes of suspected radicals, arrested them, and seized their possessions. Many were deported. Most of the victims were foreigners, usually Russians, Italians, and Jews.
Two men stand out as targets of the anti-radical campaign. They were Italian-born, residents of Boston for many years, respectable workers and dedicated anarchists. They were attempting to dispose of some anarchist leaflets when they were arrested on a charge of armed robbery and...
This was also during, it's like the Red Scare before the Red Scare. So this is something that affected not only anarchists, but also anyone who was more left or socialist, like, adjacent. So if you were a union worker or a union leader, if you were part of, like, organized militias or anything like that, anything that the government saw as, like, an oppositional threat, and you didn't have a strong financial backing, you would be more likely to be arrested. This is also when Eugene Debs was arrested for being a socialist and a union leader and trying to, like, you know, make different left-leaning changes. And not all of it had to be affiliated with Marxism, because there's so many ways that you can be left-leaning and community engaged without being a Marxist or even being a socialist. But that's a whole different discussion.
Murder. Their names were Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo
That's fair,
Vanzetti.
Randall. This is important history, though.
Oh, Psycho Vanzetti, Psycho Vanzetti, I just want to sing your name.
Door-to-door salesman, you know, they gotta do what they gotta do. Commission-based
jobs.
jobs.
The prosecution gave confused and contradictory testimony. Sacco and Vanzetti proclaimed their innocence, but they were convicted and sentenced to death. Appeal after appeal was denied. The case became an international cause. Marches and defense efforts were organized worldwide.
But on August 23, 1927, the state of Massachusetts, which had condemned Sacco and Vanzetti as violent and dangerous men, mobilized 500 heavily armed policemen to suppress protests and electrocuted the two Boston anarchists.
Our government has a long history of suppressing people who are left-leaning because it's an active threat to capitalism, or at least consumerism, or elitist society.
Finché nel mondo dittatori vivranno.
Right. Oh, the Twin Towers, they still exist. Look at that.
But of a special kind.
Good thing there's no plane in shot, you know?
We anarchists believe in freedom from the state, from religion, from all authority.
I have no idea how important this footage is, and I'm kidding.
Authority or other, that they come to
I'm
think
sorry.
that without the government they cannot live. And when they hear the anarchists saying that you must be the ruler of yourself, you must be the master of yourself, you must be able to organize your own life without the authority of the government, they think that the anarchists are crazy, and naturally they get scared, getting the notion that without the shepherd to lead the sheep, it would be chaos, confusion, anarchy.
You just described the reality, how the state has kind of grown to be this monster. And you've been an anarchist, you deserted the army, 64 years old. You mentioned before that they're the last of a generation of anarchists. What's your feeling about that? I mean, do you feel like you represent the kind of generation of anarchism and radicalism that's gone?
Well, no. Anarchism will always be the same. There might be variation between one anarchist and the other anarchist according to the generation in which they live. But the principle is there.
What about your generation of anarchists?
Our generation is all dead, but not the principle. The principle that we had 3 generations ago is the same. They are the same principle today.
Do you see people now carrying on?
We still, we want the people to be able to rule themselves And the new generation has the same principle. There is no difference between the other one. The only thing that our generation was a generation of hungry people, hungry working people, peasant, hungry worker. Why now today,
the Chinese times, that's what I call it.
In the at least in the industrial cities, in the industrial nation, they live better than the bourgeois of our generation were living.
Bourgeoisie. Is this the same dude? I feel like this is a different dude, right? Yes! What a sleigh. Oh my god. There's a lot of nuance to the song, by the way. I'm not going to describe all of it. We touched on a lot of it in stream though, so it's okay. It's a documentary, okay? That's all I have to say.
Anarchy begins with the mind, and American minds for generations have been programmed totally the opposite direction.
Well, okay, the film we're doing, at least at this point, is called Anarchism in America. Now, where do you think you fit into this film?
What's that?
We fit into this film because we, in our own way, are
That's
trying
a lot to unpack that I'm not going to do right now.
Like, be them not just written laws, but mental laws, social mores, and American attitudes that have slowly turned this into one of the greediest countries in the world.
And awkward.
All the categories, but what are you trying to do with your music?
The bottom line in America, at least, is we like to get people to think for themselves. We don't come out and say, this is our opinion, think like us, or it's not cool. No, what we're saying is, this is our opinion, judge it for what you will, but for Christ's sakes, have an opinion.
Oh yeah, George, me neither. He's Louise Randall. Oh my god, what's next? Oh, I like the book. This is more modern times though.
Anarchy in this country is going to be very, very hard to make it work. It'll take literally long after we're all dead.
Uber Alles is a thing that they would say in Germany for long live Germany, by the way. It's German for above all else or above everything. California was they had very different legislation back then. I would have to do more. Well, we're just not gonna dive really deep into that. Lonely Revolt.
I don't believe that one can practice anarchism in this society. I believe it would be utterly illusory to contend, say, that a food co-op can replace general, you know what I mean, Grand Union, or that a so-called People's Bank, to use a concept of Proudhon, who is supposed to have been an anarchist, could replace Chase Manhattan. Nor do I think that one can go around living a holier-than-thou ethical life, that essentially amounts to an ongoing guilt trip against other people.
Yes.
I find that it is basically impossible to live a thoroughly anarchist life within a capitalist society. But I do believe this, that one can try to maintain a high ethical standard. And that is one of the beautiful things about anarchism, that it brings ethics into socialism instead of mere science into socialism, such as Marx does. That one can live an ethical life. One can concern oneself personally with what is humane and what I would prefer to call libertarian behavior. One can protest and one can try
Term is different
to
nowadays.
work with projects in which people
European
learn
libertarianism.
how to take control of their lives, even if in fact they can't do so until there are fundamental social changes. Those are the commitments, I believe, that anarchism seriously poses to the individual. And it raises a very high standard. It is demanding in that respect. It demands that you search into what is a humanistic sensibility and what is a humanistic ethic.
Look how cute this is. It's just very aesthetic. Oh, look at the cars. I enjoy this documentary quite a bit.
The ideas of anarchism have always been part of the history of the United States. And anarchism survives because it confronts the crucial dilemma of society, the question of authority and the relationship of the individual to the state.
Anarchism alone, among political and social ideologies, opposes not just the authority of the state, of the military, of labor and religious leadership. It opposes the idea of authority itself.
A red Pinto, yeah!
Power rules the world today. Power corrupts, they say. And absolute power corrupts you. Absolutely. It can change a man who has a heart of gold. Make him cruel, wicked, self-centered and cold. Many men in this land, many organizations fought for freedom and justice throughout the land.
He's fucking insane, Jesus. This song plays a lot in the beginning of the documentary, by the way.
Prostituting the island, to all and sundry, they peddling my people's right. Exploiting, oppressing, less freedom, more suffering. I wonder how we survive. Taking over, my friend. Taking over again. Take it over, don't vex with me, shorty. Take it over, I'm singing as I see. Food we can't even buy. Murder the price too high. Malnutrition killing the children while we the adults starving. Yet the price is
It feels so awkward to dance to it because it's so serious. I love how they show like the elites, you know, the governing elites, different than other elites. Bro, Randall, you're diving deep into this.
They're making my people starve, exploiting, oppressing, less freedom, more suffering. This thing just can't go on. Take it over, my friend. Take it over, carefully again. Take it over, don't vex with me, shorty. Take it over, I'm singing as I see.
Hope your liver's okay.
Can't even find. Life seems a waste of time. Nothing to do but sit around the corner line.
I have to go soon, but I want the credits to play through because I like the song.
Others turn to crime and steal what they can get. And the judges have no sympathy. They're hammering everyone that they catch. Even little children are jailed without regret.
It's so sad.
And authority, they don't give a damn about you or me. Or what they do, lock me up when they catch
Okay, I should pause it now.
smoking little tampy while the social
Anyways, What did you think? I thought it was good. I actually really like this documentary. Aside from, at one point, we don't have to talk about that. You guys were not here for that. Totally. So nothing happened. I listened to the entire thing and I watched most of it. I just didn't see like anything past like the clips I showed because I was working as I was listening to it. Lesson learned. Anyways, my liver is fine. Bruh. The way you say it makes me concerned, Randall. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that documentary. I thought it was really fun and very, very intriguing. George says it was fun to see all the old stuff from when I was young. Yeah, I think that's good. I thought it was really interesting. It dives deep into like how people back then thought of anarchy. And I also really wanted to show Sarah because Miss Sarah really dives deep into how people perceive it nowadays. And that's why I shared, pardon me, that other documentary that she was doing / like in, because she did such a good job. Like a really, really good job. And I really want to see like how she perceives things nowadays too, because she's very good at it. Randall says, for me, it shows how times have changed, but a lot stays the same. Yeah, for sure. It's like same story, different verse, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. I say that all the time here. But it's true. Like, things just keep happening over and over and over again. And it's just slightly different. And she does an amazing job explaining it. Like, it's kind of her job to teach it to people, which makes sense. But I think the reason why I really enjoyed this was because it dives deep into how anarchists have been prosecuted and how it was acknowledged a lot in society up until recently. Now the narrative has changed for more like conservative anarchists, or people view anarchists to be like American libertarians, where it's just kind of advocating for the dismantling of the government and for more of a militaristic kind of like takeover where you have like city states that basically are in charge of everything and everything's more regional. Which that like there's like two different perspectives, or lots of different perspectives on how it could be enabled. But anarchism is a concept. It's a very left-leaning morale concept. It does not focus as much on like what would be the best ways to distribute things. So Marxism is more about like not necessarily ethics, but about how things could be divided between the people. But it's seen as like a left-leaning ethic superiority because people don't know a lot about anarchism. And like the band was saying towards the end of the video, I think that there's lots of concepts of anarchism that can be implemented in today's society and have it work really well. Ever since I started streaming, I've talked a lot about the co-op that I used to go to all the time. I used to live really close to a food co-op. Where tons of different farmers would all come together and sell all of their food through a base facility. And they would give that base facility like a small amount of profits, or they would donate to the facility to keep it running, and that facility would sell all the goods. And sometimes they would like buy secondary products and stuff, but in order to fund those secondary products, like let's say cans of like sunflower seed butter or whatever, like sun butter instead of like peanut butter, it's like an alternative, or stuff that's like almost like LaCroix alternatives and stuff like that. They would sell stuff out of their they would have like food that they would personally sell, so they would make burritos or meal preps and stuff like that, and from those profits they would purchase other items that they would sell through the storefront, and then they would make a profit through those so they could have local produce, local goods that people make, as well as larger scale items that are incorporated with like more modern day society. Think like brands and stuff people are familiar with. And I think more of that would be extremely, extremely helpful. But sadly, because it's a hard thing to like build up if you're not in an ag state, there's like, it's hard to find that anywhere. So Nebraska, we're lucky because we are an agriculture based state. But if you live in some place like, I don't know, like New Mexico or I'm coming in just a second. I'm finishing up. If you live someplace like New Mexico, it would be a lot harder to have that. Or maybe like Nevada or something like that, where there's less agriculture opportunities. It's harder to have cooperatives like that. So things get more complicated. It wouldn't work in New York City. It could technically work. There's alternatives. I've thought about this a lot. Um, there's alternatives that people could utilize in order to grow produce and things at a large scale, regardless of where you are, whether you be in a desert plain or even like high humidity conditions or even a northern climate where you don't get a lot of sunlight. There's ways to obtain these resources and have it be sustainable. It's just the initial investment makes it difficult in order for people to really do it. And the profit yield would most likely be low because there's low demand for it in modern day society. That's very complicated and that's a whole different conversation. Ag stuff is very interesting. But yeah, these concepts can be implemented into modern day society while having a direct democracy, which I would say is closer to democratic socialism than like true anarchism, you know, or anarchy. But there's lots of layers. And I'm very happy that we got to talk about this. I think tomorrow we might dive a little bit deeper into it. I am going to be sharing all of these resources as always on my Discord. So if you would like to, you can join. Just click the link in my bio. If it doesn't work, you can just like tell me next stream or fucking whisper me or PM me because now I have them open. I didn't have them open before. But yeah. I do have to go eat and obviously do more stuff. I have emails and things I have to prep. I have to redo certain stuff. I also have homework and stuff too. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Tomorrow we are going to be working on probably some set stuff together or maybe plants. Maybe we'll do plants or something. I don't know. But I've been really enjoying this discussion and I hope that we can continue it throughout the next coming week. So I will see you later. Please sleep well, stay safe, stay alive, and dance.